Paloma, lovely to meet you. Thank you for joining me today for this chat with Spencer. I'm very grateful for your time. Just by way of getting going, could you just let me know a bit about your professional past, how you come to be at Ward Williams? But I'm really interested immediately, this sort of psychological part of this. How does psychology fit in sustainability in the built environment? Just interested to know something about how you come to be in the position you're in now at Ward Williams.
Thank you, Spencer, and it's brilliant to be here with you today. I don't think my career is very conventional. I don't think anyone's career these days is conventional. You no longer have those kind of written paths that you just follow.
It's true.
When I was in my secondary school, and I got asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? And that question needed an imminent answer because I had to choose what I wanted to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I have this naive idea that I wanted to make the world a better place and I wanted to improve things for the people around me. And so even though I didn't have like a vocational desire to study a particular subject, that was the intention. And I thought, well, psychology will put me on the right track because by knowing a little bit more about how people think and why people behave the way they do, that will help me understand why the world works the way it does and try to make it a little bit of a better place. So the first few years of my professional life, I work as a psychologist in social services. It's probably one of the hardest jobs I've ever done, and it's very draining, and you can't detach. It's impossible. And personally, because I work with families and children in social risk, I genuinely saw the worst of what humankind can do. And after a few years of doing that, I decided I had enough. So I applied for a number of jobs, and I was super lucky to be able to work for some blue chip companies in Spain. And I work in what was called by the time social corporate responsibility. So I work for companies such as Johnson & Johnson, Nokia, and other big corporations. And then we had a young family. Me and my husband had two very young kids. The situation in Spain was a bit unstable. And I had been in the UK a few times, and I absolutely loved the country every time I came. So we thought, well, let's go there.
Your husband is Spanish?
My husband is Spanish, yeah.
So you came together?
We came together with two very young kids, 6 months old and 2 years old. With no job. The plan was just to be here for a few months, improve our English, and then come back, like almost taking a break and working out what we wanted to do. And we landed in Exeter. We absolutely fell in love. We fell in love with the country. We fell in love with the people. And we never came back.
This is good to hear.
Yeah, we always felt so welcome. And, it really felt like home. If you haven't lived in a different country, sometimes it's hard to explain because the majority of people really misses home and really, they're really homesick. And I don't think we've ever been homesick because this always has felt like this was home. So we started looking for a job, and as it happens with life, none of the plans we had materialized, and life had other plans for us. And I managed to get a job in an engineering company. So I started working for Kier, not the construction side, it was Kier Highways. I had an amazing manager and mentor. She really was the person who gave me the opportunity that I needed. And I discovered the world of construction. And then since then...
It's quite a journey from psychology,
quite a journey.
Spain to the UK to the Southwest.
And it was quite weird because, you normally identify with the profession that you've chosen. And I identified as a psychologist. And suddenly, I wasn't a psychologist anymore. And so who I was. But on the other side of things, I found myself working in an industry that was so fascinating, was so amazing. Every day was really a different day. Every project was fascinating and exciting and so fast paced. But the link missing was that naive 18 years old me that wanted to make the world a better place. And then through working in different projects, I realized, well, actually, I can still do that through buildings. Buildings are tangible. I think we spend about 85% of our lives in buildings. And until I started working for the construction industry, I had never ever questioned what buildings were doing to me, to my mental health, to my physical health, to my kids' health. You know, we study in buildings, we are born in buildings, we work in buildings, we live in buildings, we heal in buildings. And we very rarely question what those buildings are doing to us. And I started questioning that. And I also started questioning what those buildings were doing for the planet and the communities, and how different, you know, through living in different countries, I was able as well to compare, and things that work in Spain that don't work here, and things that work in the UK that will never work in Spain. And that's changing with climate change, of course. But, you know, you start realizing aspects of, you know, the built environment that unless you're involved, you very rarely notice. And so I found my why, as in, you know, my vision was I wanted to leave this planet thinking I've done my bit to make it a better place. And that bit was kind of missing when you know, my career changed from social psychologist to construction. And when I found my why again and I reconnected to who I was and what I wanted to do, that was incredible, because suddenly it all made sense, and walking past a building that you have been able to influence and shape is so rewarding and is tangible. And then having, for example, been involved with some buildings at University of Exeter, and now being able to go there with my kids and tell them, is just fantastic. Throughout my career, I've always tried to work for companies that deeply and truly care about the impact they're having, and they're doing their very best to build really high quality, conscious buildings. So that's where my career has taken me. And obviously throughout the last few years of my career, I've specialized more and more in sustainable construction, not just from a energy performance or carbon performance side of things, but also from a nature point of view, or from a psychology of a space. So again, how can you build buildings that are good for people going through menopause, or good for people that have neurodiversity or have accessibility needs? And so it's how you interconnect all those kind of things that can make human experience so much nicer when you're in a building.
So very interesting. I had no idea that I might have spent 85% of my life in buildings. As you know, over the years myself, I've thought about the buildings that I'm in. You know, when I was younger, I played the clarinet a lot as a professional clarinetist. And we used to think a lot about the acoustic, but I never really thought about the structure or other things. We did think about where the bathrooms were, because if you're a big orchestra and there's only one ladies and one gents, that was an issue. And Paloma, you're clearly passionate about sustainability, so you've been on this journey. It's quite an interesting professional journey that you've been on. You found your why, your space where you know this is what I want to do. You want to leave your mark on this world through making sure that new buildings particularly, but I presume also retrospectively retrofit type environment buildings. Where does the real passion for sustainability comes from? Because we live in a world where it's now really not about decarbonisation, it's probably about how we reduce the costs that people are feeling. But my personal view is that the world is a better place if we use the technology available to us to make sure that we live a cleaner and better life for people. But where does your passion for sustainability come from?
That's a really good question, and I think there's not a simple answer to it.
Yeah, so these things are always multifaceted,
aren't they? They really are. I've always felt a deep connection with nature. Connection has always helped me think better and feel better. And you know, when times are rough, you go to your woods, your near woods, or you go to the beach, or you go to the moors, and you instantly feel better because you feel connected and you feel part of something that is bigger than you. And seeing all these things destroyed is heartbreaking. And it's humans that are destroying those things. And it's our collective and individual actions that are damaging the only planet that we have. I was raised in a seaside town in Spain, southern Spain, and it was quite a hilly town. And my house was on the top of the hill, so every day the first thing I will see as I will wake up will be the sea.
And you're very lucky.
Extremely lucky.
Most people don't wake up and see the sea.
But that was my childhood. Like, I will see the sea, I will walk down to my secondary school or to my school, and I will see the sea all the way. And you can have, you know, the sea breeze, and you can smell the sea, and you can feel it. And then obviously you can go to the sea and you can enjoy it in winter or summer. And so when we moved to the UK, we wanted to live somewhere that was near the sea. And you will think, oh, with it being an island, that would be so easy, wouldn't it? And it will be so amazing to be able to experience all these different beaches and places. And actually, this year is the first year that I think I've only gone to the beach once. And that's because of I'm really scared of sewage. I'm really scared of going to the beach and getting my kids ill. I'm really scared of going there, not knowing what I'm swimming on.
It's a real problem around
and
the shore of the country.
Absolutely. So I think, again, trying to come back to your question, why I so deeply care about sustainability is because I think it's everyone's duty. And I think because of...
How do we make people feel a bit more engaged, though? Because a couple of things you've just said. Firstly, I too would love to be in nature more often, but the pace of life doesn't allow that. And I agree with you. I do generally feel better when I'm out.
But you see, the pace of life doesn't allow you to be in nature because we've built societies that detach us from nature. Our cities are in spite of nature. We build on top of nature. We don't build around it. We don't build with it. We build a park, and there are artificial parks that bare earth. They don't, you can't barely grow anything on them. They're just landscaped spaces with very few trees. And that's why you need to choose between living your life and a fast-paced wake up, go to school, go to work, come back, go to the gym. We've built gyms, and I do a lot of exercise, and I do sport, and I love going to the gym. But how amazing will it be to go on a trail because it's just on your, doorstep, or, being able to practice a sport in nature. And we don't, because we've created communities that are detached from nature. So you need to actively plan ahead and say, okay, today I'm going to go on a hike, or I'm going to go to the beach, or this weekend is the weekend that we're going to go to the moors. It's not in our doorstep. There are not spaces for community to gather in nature around wildlife. And so that makes it difficult for us to look after and protect and see the value that it brings. The UK, believe it or not, is one of the most depleted biodiversity countries in the world.
I didn't know that.
Only a handful of years ago.
I knew things were bad, but I didn't know it was that bad.
Only a handful of years ago. And I know I don't know the exact. So please caveat here. I may kind of make up a little bit those stats, but it's
poor. Things are not going well.
The UK was used to be 80% of the UK used to be forest land. I think at the minute it's less than 5%. The majority of land that we have is used to produce for agricultural purposes or for animal. The agricultural space is not to feed humans. The majority of the land that we're using to grow food is food that then is used to feed the animals that then we eat.
And we import, I presume,
absolutely.
Other food.
So again,
and that's not great for the planet, because the planes are flying in and the lorries are going up and down the country.
Completely, but the UK, the people in the UK, the communities deeply care about nature. They care about wildlife, they care about the seas, they care about the moors, they care about the forests, they care about the green spaces around them. But yet, as a country, we're not really looking after what we have. And something that really saddens me, and this is obviously not the UK, this is us as a species, we only value things from nature when they are dead. We don't value trees, we value wood. We don't value cows, we value beef. We don't value things when they are alive, but they only serve their purpose when they are alive.
So Paloma, how do we? It's so interesting. I agree completely with you. Well, there's a massive job, and I suppose in our own little way we're doing this by having this chat. How do we raise this further? Clearly, having passionate people like you who are speaking to people in your community, the people that you work with Ward Williams, we're doing that. And I agree with you too, the power of the individual is strong. I've always argued that we shouldn't just be worried about what the tribe says or the big group says. We have a responsibility as an individual.
Absolutely.
To act in a proper and a correct way. And you've got me thinking about a number of things, because when I think about the built environment and its interface with nature, I haven't thought about it in the way that you've just described. I will go away and try and think about that better. But how do we bring the types of things that you're talking about to a point where, I suppose it's our elected colleagues, I have to be careful, I don't want to get too political, but we elect people, whether they're sub-regional politicians or mayoral politicians or government. How do we make sure that the people who are making these decisions could start to maybe think about some of these? They feel almost like philosophical discussions, they're not. Mm-hmm. But how do we get away from just the transactional to starting about thinking things in a more global way in this regard? Do you have any thoughts about that? No easy answers.
No,
I know there's no easy answers
I was
on
going
this.
to say, I'm generally a very positive person, and I genuinely think that we don't have a values problem. We all value very similar things. Okay. Irrespective of whether we have kids or not, we value our green spaces, we value our communities, we value the cities we live and work and were raised. And we value those things. However, is the perceived value, is what that, not our values, but the value of things. And that depends on agendas, and that depends on priorities, and that depends on context. And it's difficult to persuade an individual to, be sustainable and think about offsetting and think when they're struggling to feed their families. And again, it's a matter of, how we translate that. I personally think that there are two issues here. One is the things that we value, and we've built a society over the last few years where we value short term. And whatever works short term is what goes. And we're not thinking long term. Even our political cycles don't allow.
We live in 5-year cycles.
Exactly, where you have the first year first year is pretty much blaming everything that's going wrong on the previous person.
They were terrible.
The second year is working out, okay, with what we have, what am I going to do? The third year, you actually do something. Yep. The fourth year, you start to think, okay, how do I keep this and how do I plan for the next election? Yeah. And the fifth year is, well, I'm either out or restarting a new cycle. So we only have one productive year every 5 years. So that's in terms of political kind, and we can go into more detail. I personally think we have some fantastic politicians, some really amazing politicians. At the moment, which I admire, and I'm really pleased. And we have some really strong.
This is not a normal reaction around politicians.
No, so we have politicians.
Usually it's a very negative.
Yeah,
we have some very bad politicians.
We have some bad politicians.
But you're very positive about.
I will say we have a few really, really, really bad politicians that are very loud and very annoying. But we have a lot of very good politicians, whichever colour they are, that really do want to do good. And I've had the pleasure through the APPG that I've been recently involved in having a closer relationship with some of those politicians. And I've had the pleasure through the work I do to meet some politicians like Miata Fambula. So we have some really amazing politicians, and we can name a few that are doing fantastic work. And you don't need to agree with everything they say. You need to look beyond that. You need to read beyond the agenda. So I'm hopeful on that side. On the other side, on the community, individual, personal side of things, I think unintentionally we've made the word sustainability feel something that is super overwhelming. Yes,
how do we deal with all of this?
Exactly.
It's too complicated.
It is too complicated. I had a conversation with someone at Ward the other day. We had an internal screening of the National Emergency Briefing. And then we had a debate afterwards. And one of my colleagues at Ward said, well, even if we were to be a net zero country by 2035, that is only 0.2% of what the world should do. Like we will achieve nothing in isolation.
Which of course is true.
Which of course is true, but at the same time...
But it shouldn't mean that we shouldn't aspire.
Exactly. So I think, and this is kind of the approach, so at Ward Williams, we've realized that tends to be the problem. When we are involved in a project, every sustainability measure, unless it's enforced by law and by planning law, is seen as a nice to have. And therefore, it contributes to the unviability of the project. And viability of a construction project is what needs to be preserved. And so what we realize is that people cannot deliver sustainability because it feels intangible, it feels overwhelming, it doesn't feel like something you relate to. So what we try to do with the work that we are doing is to deconstruct sustainability, stop even calling it sustainability, and bring it down to the smallest components possible, and then hold hands with the people involved in projects through, for example, we've done some publications. One of them is called Sustainability Pathfinder. And what the Sustainability Pathfinder does is hold hands with the reader of the book and help them rebuild a meaning of sustainability that they can feel ownership of, that they can feel they are part of, and they can feel confident that they can deliver. And so they rebuild sustainability tailored to their context, to their circumstances, to the background, and to the project they're dealing with. So it can be applied to a project, it can be applied to a strategy, it can be applied to anything. Essentially, what we're trying to do is let's deconstruct this really, really complex word or concept into very small parts, and let's help people rebuild what that means to them so they can actually embrace it and deliver it. And then there is another element that we are trying to work, and we are collaborating with organizations such as University of Exeter. And it's in the concept of disagreeing and disagreement, and how disagreement is perceived as a bad thing. It has a negative connotation. If we disagree, it's because, there's something wrong. And one of us is wrong because we are disagreeing. Surely if we were both right, we will be agreeing. But we don't, we're disagreeing. And it's how can we disagree better? And again, it's how that disagreement can take us to a next situation where we may still disagree, but that disagreement has taken us somewhere. So it's by deconstructing and disagreeing, which can sound a bit philosophical and technical, but actually it's something we do every day. Like, I'm sure you disagree with colleagues and friends and family, and I do disagree.
I'm always right.
Yeah, well.
This is a problem for them.
But you know what I mean?
They struggle with my...
with your rightness.
Actually, it's interesting, the disagreement. I try not to disagree. Maybe it's the type of people we are. I try not to disagree with people.
Yeah.
I try to listen to what they're saying, and I try to empathise and understand their position. Sometimes it's really difficult, of course, because you think, where did this come from? It's completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's craziness to think like this. I mean, in a broader context, one of the problems I think personally with the country is that people don't allow that space to engage in that discussion without turning it, as you've said, into something which is a big fight. It's not a big fight. We just don't happen to agree.
Exactly.
And then the other problem I have with our society is that we spend far too much time, particularly here in the UK, talking about things and not doing things. There has to be an outcome for the discussion or the disagreement, and it has to move something forward. And particularly with our big infrastructure projects or our big housing, and we all know the problems around the planning in the UK, we're just agonising over things over and over again, regurgitating things. Am I going to have that extra runway? There has to be a point where we are a bit quicker. Now, I'm not saying the French, Paloma, have it right. For instance, we're going to have our TGV and it's going straight through all of these communities and it just goes straight and it goes straight in. On the way down, I live in Sheffield, and on the way down I drive via the southwest side of Birmingham. And HS2, they're busy building these massive structures of railway bridges over motorways to bring this connectivity between London and Birmingham together. And whether you agree or disagree with that decision, someone has made a decision and they've enacted the decision. So So I agree with you. The disagreement is a good thing, but then I think we need to be able to move those things forward. Can I ask you about retrofit?
Yep.
So we've got this massive crisis in our country. Eco4 was cancelled last year. Relatively small amount of money, £1.5 billion. It's had a terrible knock-on and negative impact on the people who particularly are installing. And of course, we mustn't forget they're installing really positive measures to homes that make sure that the mould isn't on the walls and that people are warmer. And that's all grinding to a halt. What are your thoughts about, I suppose, where we've got to with Eco4 and how we bridge that gap, which is rather urgent, I feel. But how do we do retrofit better? We have 28 million homes in the UK, and a good watch of them are owned socially through housing associations and different local authority. How do we bring those buildings up to spec?
With the
Another small question.
No, it's fine. My views is the Eco4. You will get thoughts on Eco4 depending on who you're asking. If you're asking the industry, of course, the fact that they cancel Eco4 has created a massive challenge for suppliers and installers that have geared up to be able to deliver to something that was a confirmed budget and suddenly has disappeared. And that is really difficult. And it's really difficult for particularly SMEs, but also bigger companies to plan ahead if you don't have a pipeline and a stable market. It's just, and it's not just supplying products, it's also making sure you have the people with the skills.
Of course, there could be a loss of skills. People will leave the sustainability install space and they will go and do a different job.
Absolutely. From the side of people, and I have been in conversation, and I know there are community groups because of how poorly their homes were retrofitted. And I've come to the conclusion...
Which of course is a real problem. The quality of work is a very important part
So
of
with
this.
Eco4 or any other projects, in the retrofit sector, I think the main challenge we have is how disjointed everything is. Everybody's working in silos. We don't have a join up perspective of how to do things well. And that you can extrapolate that to a lot of other similar issues we have in our society, which is that each person is looking at the very own little thing without thinking that everything is interconnected. It is a system.
Yes.
And with retrofit in particular, the magnitude of the systemic change that is needed is so big that it is difficult to respond to the immediate and urgent need to retrofit our buildings. And at the same time, it needs to, both need to kind of overlap. And so the way as a country we've tried to address that was to raise policy after policy and one policy to cover the previous policy and to address but we're not going to the root cause of the problem. And retrofit is a massive issue because we have all the techniques, we have all the tools, the knowledge, the expertise to retrofit our building stock, no matter how protected, listed the building is. We can do it, but we don't have a join-up approach. And so we had funding, and then someone is picking up that funding and selling a product, but then those products are not installed in a sequence that considers the building as a whole in a holistic way, considering the building as a system in itself. And so that has consequences to the building users. And then if something goes wrong, and things sometimes go wrong,
of course,
that has a reputational damage on the industry, which makes you think, well, next time I'm going to say no because, I need to protect my home. And then people who don't have the capacity to say yes or no because, they live in social housing and things get done to their homes.
Yes. Almost outside of their orbit of control.
Exactly.
People knock on the door and say, we've come from the local authority or the housing association and we're going to fit this.
And to be fair, again, I have great faith in humans. I generally think the majority of humans want to do what's right. And the majority of housing associations that I know, they do want to retrofit the homes. They want to make sure that the people living in the homes can live a healthy, long, pleasant lives.
Yes.
But because the system is so fragmented, it makes it almost impossible when you try to link things like availability of labor and materials. When you want to join that up with viability of products, budget is limited, time is limited. Sometimes where grants are available, they come with a number of requirements. And I have been involved in projects where, you know, an organization has applied for a bit of funding and the funding announcement was planned for 3 months' time. The announcement is not made until 9 months' time, but the end target date remains. And suddenly, the time frame for you to deliver that project has halved. It is actually impossible to deliver something to the level of quality and cost if you get half of the time to plan for it. And so that has consequences. But then it's who is going to pick up those consequences? How much is going to cost the government, or how much is going to cost housing associations or local authorities to go and redo what has been done? And it's not because people don't want to do a good job. Sometimes, again, it's down to context, it's down to, you know, availability of funding and skills and resources.
So we need to have really elected colleagues who say, we understand that our housing stock needs to be retrofitted, regardless of what that's going to be. It could be fabric, or it could be additional things like solar and battery storage, far infrared. And we've got to do that through parliaments and have a vision, a joined up vision. And then we need less bureaucracy, but a way of making sure that the funds can be allocated in a way that good quality work can
Absolutely.
be done.
I think we need better conversations. I think we need people talking to
More
each other.
More chats like this.
More chats like this, but we need universities talking to industry and industry talking to parliament. And we need homeowners to talk to the industry. And we need a joined up approach. And also, like with other subjects like education, it cannot be reliant on who is in power.
Exactly.
We need a strategy that remains.
I agree, and it mustn't be stop-start.
Exactly.
There's a peculiar British thing that we start something, things seem to be going quite, and then we stop.
Yeah.
We leave it for 5 years, and then everyone goes, we need to come back to this, and we start again.
Yeah.
And we're forever in this loop where we never really get all the way around. We stop and then we start again.
Absolutely. And in the meantime, life keeps happening.
Of course. And these issues, I'd say often, and it's a personal view again, it's not rocket science, this. You know, people are always going to need homes to live in.
Yeah.
They're always going to need to pay for some type of utility. And, you know, how do we make that mix work? Paloma, this has been a wonderful chat. Thank you for your time.
My absolute pleasure.
This morning. I've really enjoyed it. And maybe we could have a second chat sometime soon.
That'll be fantastic. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.